4 huge scaffolds dominating a remote Alaskan mountain.
These structures don't look super technological. They're like giant billboards, but they were part of what was, in its day, the most sophisticated technology we had.
A war-torn ruin left standing in the shadow of North Korea.
If you went into the building, you would quite possibly come out in a box, and if you came out upright, you might come out shattered beyond sanity.
A factory complex in an idyllic valley that is not quite what it seems.
You start to see clues that this place might not have been so friendly after all. The big, heavy metal door on the rock face. Who were they trying to keep out, or what were they trying to keep in?
A medieval castle that became the playground of a vengeful killer.
So either the bloody Countess was a stone-cold mass murderer of young girls, or she was a powerful but innocent woman framed by her unscrupulous rivals.
Decaying relics, ruins of lost worlds, forged through years of toil, now haunted by the past. Their secrets waiting to be revealed. Slovakia, 60 miles from the capital, Bratislava. An imposing hilltop structure was the scene of one of the 17th century's bloodiest scandals.
Looking up onto the hillside, clearly man has made its mark here in a very fortified, defensive kind of way.
It doesn't seem big enough to be a fort, and dare I say it, it's not grand enough to be a palace.
2 towers loom over the grounds. One leads into a 3-meter deep pit.
It's a hole in the ground. It looks like a dungeon.
The other tower is reduced to just one perilous standing wall.
This isn't just nature has destroyed this. There's been some kind of deliberate effort too.
The perimeter walls, lined with cannon battlements, suggest a violent past.
If you're expecting uninvited guests, this is the perfect spot to be. It looks like it's ready for an attack.
The events that took place here became folklore, then legend, a reminder that history is written by the victors. In 1610, blood-curdling screams were echoing from the basement. Young women were suffering unbearable torture at the hands of a psychopath.
It was 8 girls who suffered this way.
Marcela Bednarova grew up hearing the terrible stories surrounding this place.
The girls were humiliated. And there were some psychological and sexual torture as well. They were waiting for their destiny in shackles.
The girls were made to stand naked in the cold cellar for days.
The rumors surrounding this place are extremely disturbing. And we don't know exactly what happened here, but everyone who knows something about this place agrees that it was terrible.
This is Countess Castle. Built in the 13th century to defend the border of the Hungarian Empire, for generations the castle was traded between warring noble families. Until 1604, when Countess Elizabeth Báthory would change the castle and the town of Countess forever.
When Elizabeth, in her early 40s, as a widow, moved full-time into the castle, she must have appeared unbelievably glamorous to the local villagers with their hard lives. She had this sort of youthful glow about her.
Elizabeth inherited the castle upon the death of her husband, a member of the powerful Nadesty family.
She inherited all of his property. And suddenly, she was the head of a wealthy, noble household possibly one of the most powerful single women in Hungary at the time, in a period when women were largely treated as second-class citizens.
She invited young women into these rooms to sweep the floors and cook her meals.
In her 40s, she's there offering a school, basically, for other young noble women. It wasn't uncommon, it was a normal thing to do, to go and live with another family and learn how to housekeep, how to prepare for marriage and life ahead.
But the true cruelty of the Hungarian nobility was about to be exposed.
Rumors started to circulate. The girls who went to Countess castle didn't always come back.
On the 29th of December, 1610, soldiers stormed through the castle gates and searched the grounds.
When the soldiers looked around, they found one dead girl. Then 2 girls were reported injured or almost dying with visible marks of cruelty or violence.
One of them was already dead, but the other still had just enough life force to point the finger at her killer, Elizabeth.
The young widow may have been a woman in a man's world, but she also had a reputation for barbarism.
It's said that she physically hurt her students for minor infractions, like folding the sheets wrong or spilling water, even for just looking at her the wrong way.
The punishments ranged, well, the stories say, everything from just a slap around the face to drawing blood. And then it got more and more gruesome.
Supposedly, she would prick them with sewing needles.
She bit them until she drew blood. She smeared honey on them and exposed them to bees and ants.
Cut them with scissors.
Scald them with hot metal bars.
Leaving girls out in the cold to freeze to death.
And one of her most notorious acts happened inside the castle's dungeon.
Elizabeth needed her manor house free because she expected the visit of her daughter Anna. So she ordered the girls to move up to the castle to stay there during the daughter's visit.
The girls were made to stand naked in the cold cellar for days. When they were let out, some of them could barely even walk. And they were killed very soon afterwards.
It's said that Elizabeth Báthory killed up to 600 young girls. She literally has a Guinness World Record for it.
The rumors of her savagery go all the way back to her childhood.
She came from a family notorious for its alcoholism, incest, and sexual deviancy. When she was young, she suffered from terrible migraines, which her family diagnosed as demonic possession. It's said that she even bathed in the blood of her victims. That might explain the youthful complexion.
The soldiers arrested Elizabeth. She was tried and banished to her castle tower for the rest of her days. The tyranny of the bloody Countess was over. But not everything is as it seems in this grim fairy tale.
There's one thing that doesn't quite add up here. Out of an alleged 600 or more victims of Elizabeth, we haven't found a single grave or a single skeleton. Nothing.
The man who arrested her and found all the bodies just so happened to be head of a rival house in the neighboring province, which is unreliable and suspicious.
Elizabeth was clever, she was literate, she could speak 4 languages. She was also a woman. She had a massive target on her back.
Looking at this as a lawyer, despite concerns over the evidence, I can't help but think that there was something ghastly going on in that castle. It's very rare that there's any smoke without fire.
So either Elizabeth Báthory, the bloody Countess, was a stone-cold mass murderer of young girls, or she was a powerful but innocent woman framed by her unscrupulous rivals. We may never know for sure.
The castle stood for another 100 years until it was sacked in a rebellion. What remains is open to tourists seeking to learn about the legend of Elizabeth Báthory. In the remote northwest of Alaska, a cluster of constructions loom over a barren landscape.
Only 150 miles from Russia sit these curved steel monoliths on the crest of Anvil Mountain.
There's not a tree, there's barely a bush, and rising up on the top of this hill are these 4 huge structures. They almost look like some warped Salvador Dali idea of a billboard.
It's almost like they've left a segment of a modern art museum propped up by some kind of scaffolding right here in the middle of nowhere.
Their simple form belies their once crucial function.
It was very top secret. I mean, it was high, high security up there because this was all cutting-edge technology.
When you think about it for a second, it's clear it's some sort of communication device, whether it's for radar or microwaves or something, but it's not clear what exactly.
Richard Benneville is mayor of the nearby town of Nome, and this site holds a particular resonance for him.
Sometimes I feel like it's walking among the pyramids. I'm very proud sometimes of what mankind can do. I feel a sense of pride. I know that this site can work.
The roots of this facility can be traced back to the 19th century, when Alaska became American property, a time when Russia and the US were allies.
At the time that the US purchased Alaska from Russia, it was a very good investment. I don't think anybody anticipated that Russia would become our biggest geopolitical foe.
In 1949, the Soviet Union shocked the world when it detonated its first atomic bomb at a test site in Kazakhstan. A Soviet nuclear attack was now a very real possibility. In the 1950s, the nuclear arms race between the Soviet Union and the United States was ramping up. Local resident Richard Benneville remembers this time well.
I knew every night I went to bed that the planes on the flight line had the bombs in them 24/7, ready to go in about a 5-minute notice. That was the Cold War to this 18-year-old kid.
The problem in Alaska was how to communicate an incoming threat and respond accordingly.
If your radar detected Soviet bombers on their way to bomb America, you'd want to tell somebody right away. And the problem here was that all they had was old-fashioned copper wire telephone technology.
There's no roads over most of the state. There's no telegraph wires. There's no telephone wires. At one point from Nome, they could only send 1 telephone call at a time.
Huge distances made communication difficult. Even high-frequency signals would fizzle out when the northern lights appeared.
Telecommunications functioned strictly by line of sight, so the rapid transmission of information over long distances was impossible. A new communications infrastructure was imperative. But what technology could effectively deal with this latest threat?
Alaska has a really interesting place in the history of the Cold War because it is so close to Russia and it's so close to the North Pole.
At the end of World War II, Alaska's defenses were focused on fighting a southern foe, not one that was coming over the North Pole.
If Soviet bombers came over the horizon, there was no effective warning system in place. A solution was found with this, White Alice, a radio station within an extensive Air Force telecommunications network.
They were part of the DEW line. The DEW line, which collected information actually from the top of Scotland all the way across North Atlantic, Iceland, Greenland, Canada, keeping a radar net over the North Pole.
Their name is widely believed to be an acronym. White for the snow-covered location, and ALICE, which stands for Alaska Integrated Communications and Electronics.
A typical White Alice site consists of 4 dishes grouped in pairs to receive and transmit signals to and from neighboring stations.
Since they couldn't just send a radio signal in a straight line to the next receiver, it was too far away. They would aim it up at an angle into the sky where it would bounce off a layer of the atmosphere, it would bounce off the troposphere, and then come back down hundreds of miles away and be received at the other end.
The system is called forward propagating tropospheric scatter.
Tropospheric scattering has many advantages over other technologies because bouncing signals off the atmosphere means that the hubs don't need a clear line of sight, which is particularly advantageous in mountainous regions of Alaska.
This process meant that White Alice sites could be 200 miles apart. They could also handle multiple phone calls at the same time. And crucially, for the military, they were secure. A transmission beamed from one spot could only be received at another precise spot. And that made it virtually impossible to intercept.
This network of linked sites would be crucial against the various Cold War threats.
Across northern Alaska, there were a whole range of stations designed to detect first incoming bombers, and then later, as missiles became a bigger threat, radar systems to detect whether missiles had been launched and were headed to the heartland of the US.
The 31 original White Alice sites took 3 years to build, with the first station operational in 1956. But constructing these vast antennas was no easy task.
We're about 700 miles to the nearest highway. We're about 750 miles from Anchorage. So we are way out there, right where the Bering Strait and Russia almost meet.
So to build these installations, they had to not just fly in equipment, they used dog sleds. They were really out there in primitive, brutal conditions.
The enemy was time and weather. Hundreds of tons of metal had to be brought in by air. This was a steel jigsaw puzzle that had to be assembled quickly and effectively and had to be strong enough to withstand the extremes of Alaskan storms.
It was the latest and most sophisticated telecommunications technology in the world.
The US even connected Hawaii and the Philippines through the Pacific scatter system. But the biggest impact was on Alaska itself. It unified the region in ways that no other technology could have done.
However, construction was extremely expensive. The total bill came to a staggering $300 million.
Initially, they thought they needed 6 people and 25 kilowatts to operate the site. But actually, in the end, they needed 20 people and about 120 to 180 kilowatts of electrical power just to operate the system.
Before White Alice was even complete, a new technology arrived which would come to replace it.
It's a bit ironic that by the time White Alice was becoming operational in 1957, 1958, Sputnik was up in the sky.
Satellite communications came in, and that wound up being a much more reliable system that didn't depend on these remote installations of antennae, manned by these small groups of guys freezing their butts off on the tundra for, year in and year out.
Was it successful? I think you'd have to say yes, because it has allowed us to get to where we are today, which is alive.
White Alice remained in use until the 1970s as a civilian phone network. And in some cases, due to their security, the military still uses troposcattering networks even today. At the northernmost limits of South Korea is a troubled region littered with the ruins of a conflicted past.
The demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea is actively dangerous. This is not some historic relic. There is almost a war going on across this piece of ground today.
From up on top of a hill, you can see into North Korea. And this place is right in the shadow of that.
Gutted and scarred, this shell of a structure has a clear story to tell.
The building's not just derelict, it's been completely devastated. You can see that the only thing that's holding it in place is these modern reinforcement bars.
This isn't a place that was slowly left to decay. It feels like this was a target.
Just south of the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, a devastated structure dominates its surroundings. Yet it appears to be out of place.
Someone has taken some Stalinist architecture and dropped it right here on the Korean border. And because of that Stalinist architecture, you can tell that this is a communist North Korean edifice. Why is it ruined? And why is it here in South Korea?
Following years of Japanese occupation, at the end of the Second World War, authority over the Korean peninsula was split in two.
The Soviets grabbed the northern half, and the Americans, who were in the process of occupying Japan, grabbed the southern half.
They divided the country up on the 38th parallel, the line of latitude. And this created a very crude north-south border on the map.
This building sits in the area of Chair 1, positioned just 40 miles above that line of demarcation. Local resident Mr. Kim grew up in this area, his family having lived through the unrest that soon followed the construction of this building.
This is the Labour Party building. It's actually the Chair 1 county branch of the Labour Party. When this area came under communist rule in 1946, this was built as the local headquarters for the communist government.
Dominating the area, this structure clearly set out the party's aim of commanding over the local people.
Now, this is a 3-story building, while all the other buildings in the area were single-story wooden structures. And it sits on top of a high platform. The building was actually built upon a raised level, so it must have looked very daunting for the locals here. This building epitomized the authority of communism.
But the North weren't only interested in ruling over the local population. They had ambitious plans for this place.
Chair 1 was the largest city near to the 38th parallel. That's why they built the party headquarters here. North Korea ruled the surrounding area from here, but they also used it to help prepare for the attack on the south.
Their ultimate aim was to take control of the entire Korean peninsula.
Chair 1 was an incredibly tense border town for the simple reason that it was a staging post for the North Korean troops. So here there would have been massed a vast number of forces, and that made this a very tense place.
Backed by Stalin, at the head of this North Korean communist regime was Kim Il-sung.
Kim Il-sung tries to replicate Stalin's dictatorship in North Korea. And that means that the North Korean dictatorship is centralized, is brutal, and is ready to repress the individual in the interests of the state and the ruling party.
With the arrival of Kim Il-sung, who had served in the Soviet army in the war, things really began to change, and the peninsula went on to effectively a war footing.
For those living in Chair 1, having the local party headquarters on their doorstep could be a terrifying prospect. And old rumors about what happened inside still persist to this day.
Back then, for the people here, this was a very mysterious place. It's said that those people who opposed communism or the rules of the land were dragged in here to be tortured and killed. But the problem we face looking at this today is that the people who were responsible for the atrocities here have all returned to the north. And there are no records left to confirm these stories.
Outside of this building, Kim Il-sung soon saw an opportunity to assert his dominance over the whole peninsula.
In 1950, on the 25th of June, the North Korean army rolls across the 38th parallel, knocks the South Korean army almost out of the way.
The Northerners blazed their way down the peninsula, in the end cornering the Southern forces into just one small pocket.
The South Korean army, the American occupation force, they're all in one town in Busan in the south. It looks like it's all over for South Korea.
With their backs against the wall and a communist victory looking likely, US forces, led by General MacArthur, set about turning the tables with an invasion deep behind enemy lines.
The other thing the United States does, the United States internationalizes the Korean War. The Americans get the UN to come in on the American and South Korean side, and they undo the successful North Korean invasion of the South.
Quickly, Southern forces regained control and moved rapidly north, soon pushing past Chair 1. But for those held prisoner here, it was too late. Nearby, the ruins of a water treatment facility now stand as a marker to how those individuals met a tragic end.
So after the war, the bodies of many people were found here, and this has become a very harrowing place in Chair 1.
The North Korea leadership were very concerned that in their retreat, they did not want enemies of the people, as they called them, to survive.
In Chair 1, there are a lot of scars left from the war, but this is the place where numerous prisoners and civilians were killed before the communist army were driven out and fled the area. This is a heartbreaking place which will never be forgotten by the people of Chair 1.
The people they'd been holding prisoner down in the building in town were brought to this other site where they were murdered. In total, around 300 people were killed in this massacre.
With the war raging on, the destruction of Chair 1 crept ever closer. And as the largest structure in the area, this building would soon become a key target. In 1950, as the Southern forces advanced, the old Communist Party headquarters became firmly fixed in the crosshairs. The violence of that time is clearly written all across what remains.
These marks are from the tracks of a US Army tank, which came up here to destroy the building. I think destroying the Labour Party building was intended as a show of strength. This was the local headquarters of the North Korean army, who were the enemy.
While it remains standing, This structure and the surrounding town was soon facing an end game. Just a few months after taking the area, the southern forces were being pushed back out of Chair 1.
The one thing that you can't allow is this politically important symbol to fall into enemy hands. So you burn the place to the ground. The whole town burns except for one thing, that building that looms over the town.
In 1953, an armistice was signed, ending the fighting. And a new border was drawn up just a few miles to the north of this building. The ruins now serve as a reminder of the past and a symbol of hope for the future.
We must not forget what needs to be remembered. Also, it's a crucial task for the two Koreas as one people to reunify and achieve prosperity together.
In the northern Czech Republic, just 6 miles from the German border, a rural scene hides a sordid history.
Here is a lovely valley with well-maintained woodlands, no doubt a clean stream running through it, and pretty towns at suitable intervals. This is very much a Czech valley with all the signs of decades of happiness.
A complex of empty buildings stands amongst the trees.
Rooms take up entire floors, and there are hundreds of metal columns keeping the ceilings up. Something very heavy used to be kept on these floors.
These were once grand, efficient factories of some kind, and now they're abandoned, they're overgrown. Why would you build something this expensive and walk away from it?
Behind these buildings are clues to a history that the locals would rather forget.
You can see the remains of a camp, and you can see a big chimney next to that camp, and that's never going to be good news.
And at the center of it all is a gateway that guards a terrible secret.
You arrive at this rock face and you see this huge metal door hiding something inside this rock face. And you wonder, well, that looks like a lot of security.
What happened in this remote outpost? And what is behind that big metal door? In the 19th century, a building was put here to take advantage of a new wonder material. Petr Joza has explored this site extensively.
We are in one of the halls of company Franz Preidel. The building was constructed in 1867 as one of 3 in Rabstein Valley to produce cotton. In this building, there were 16,000 spindles. Individual spinning machines stood in between these pillars. It was one of the biggest factories in this area.
This is Rabstein Janska, a factory that produced cotton on a vast scale. But this was more than a business. It was the breadbasket of a community.
There were several generations working in this factory. The factory was hugely beneficial for the local economy because the company used the money they made to finance several things. They had schools built in the area, had a chapel restored, and that's all thanks to the profit from these factories.
But the factory's benign appearance is betrayed by an ominous feature within its grounds.
Then you see the big metal door, and you have to ask, what did you build here? What are you trying to keep in the ground? Or what are you trying to keep out?
Inside this building, when you look closely, you start to see clues that this place might not have been so friendly after all.
Although the early 1900s saw business booming here, in 1929, the market collapsed.
In the late 1920s, a depression begins all across Central and Eastern Europe, which has devastating effects on manufacturing and on the economies of Eastern Europe in general. Hundreds of workers who relied on their jobs here for their livelihood, they're all out of work.
The old factory was shut down, and for over a decade, the buildings lay dormant. But in 1942, the factory came under new management, the Nazis.
And the Germans had always looked kind of hungrily at Bohemia. The Germans, first nibbled at the Sudetenland, and then they take all of Czechoslovakia in the course of 1938-39.
The Nazis occupied Rabstein-Janska, but they had a new plan for the old factory.
Cotton production was low on the list of Nazi priorities. What they really needed more than anything was aircraft.
Half a mile from the factory is what remains of the Nazis' strategy to massively expand their aircraft production.
The German economy has to be kept going, and the German war machine has to be supplied. And one of the ways the Nazis do this is by conscripting people into labor.
They constructed a labor camp.
Nacházíme se u koncentračního tábora Rabstein.
We are at Rabstein concentration camp, which was established in 1944 for approximately 690 to 700 prisoners. Because they couldn't find enough workers, prisoners were brought here, and the buildings were surrounded by barbed electric wire.
By exploiting labor, by making slaves labor in their factories. The Nazi regime is based not only on military power and not only on their twisted idea of racial superiority, it is also based on slavery.
But those interred here were not all treated equally.
There was even a decree from SS Reichsfuhrer Himmler, which clearly specified what people of each nationality can and cannot get. So the Dutch, who the Germans considered Aryan and basically German, were not guarded at all. They were living privately, renting from private persons. On the other hand, the Poles, Russians and French were doing poorly. The French were relatively fine because they were still considered Aryan, but the Eastern nations were housed in camps behind barbed wire. They could only eat what they were given in the camp. They couldn't even pick an apple somewhere on the street, or they'd be strictly punished.
The ultimate result that Hitler and the Nazis want is for all of the people they consider subhuman to be first slaves and then dead slaves. Working conditions for Nazi slave laborers are designed to be able to get work out of them, but ultimately they are going to be worked to death.
Prisoners were marched from the camp to the factory and back in an unending, brutal cycle. But events hundreds of miles away would soon make life here even harder.
Between the 20th and the 25th of February 1944, the Allies bombed the hell out of Nazi fighter plane production.
Germany definitely lost control over its own airspace, so they established Jägerstab. It was a task force designed to decentralize fighter aircraft production and move it underground.
The manpower required was huge. Digging those holes was nasty work. They used dynamite and pickaxes. You wouldn't want that assignment.
The Nazis ordered 4 tunnels to be dug into the rock face.
They planned almost 83,000 square meters of space, carved out of the rock underneath these old 19th century textile mills.
They were so desperate to start production of these vital aircraft that they moved the machinery in before the prisoners had even finished digging the tunnels.
The noise, the fumes, the lack of daylight, it would have been like digging your own hell.
So here we are, at a shaft's crossing, where during excavation, part of the ceiling collapsed. 3 prisoners from the concentration camp died when the ceiling fell on them.
They were essentially worked together in these underground factories.
By January 1945, Germany was months away from losing the war, but the prisoners underground didn't know it.
People kept working, suffering, dying, not just for an evil cause, but for a lost cause.
But just weeks before Allied tanks rolled into Berlin, the prisoners at Rabstein-Janska got a glimmer of hope from above.
The first news they have that the war is almost over and that they will probably survive the war is in March of 1945, when a Soviet plane flies overhead and 5 paratroopers jump out and land without any German resistance.
Then, on the 8th of May, without warning or announcement, the prison guards began to disappear.
The first they knew that the Germans who were holding them captive had lost the war was when the German guards just didn't turn up for work that day. The army was on its way to liberate them. The Nazis had taken off to avoid being captured.
We're at the end of the shaft, where you can see rows of drillings for dynamite. The demolition charges were placed in these and blasted. They did not do it here because this is the place where excavating stopped at the end of World War II, because the Second Polish Army arrived and the construction of the underground factory was stopped.
And all the laborers at Rabstein could do was put down their pickaxes and start trying to figure out how to get home.
Today, the factory buildings have been reclaimed by the community. The camp and the tunnels stand as an important reminder of the brutality endured here. Abandoned, disintegrating, reclaimed by nature. Structures once at the cutting edge, bearing witness to the forces, pioneers, and villains that define the world today. Emblems of a shared past still standing in our present.